Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here together with you. My paper is on multimodal approaches. As I'm teaching Romanian as a foreign language in our university, I found the need to get rid of those basically traditional textbooks and try to find something more interesting for my students while teaching and while having the evaluation process. So my presentation has two parts, the teaching part, which relates to the skills that need to be emphasized, and the evaluation process. I'm not going to talk more about multimodal texts, as you already know what multimodal texts are. But for each text, or for this model text, I came up with 4D advantages that I found the most relevant for these types of texts. And these are: discover culture, heritage, deepen the understanding of certain ideas or topics, diversify the exposure to literature, and develop language skills and imagination in correlation with a skill that needs to be formed. The first activity on my list emphasizes the importance of discovering a culture's heritage while developing the listening skill. In order to value the national poets and singers or music bands of a certain country, and at the same time to practice the listening skills, especially for B1, B2 learners. A good idea would be to get the students listen to some songs based on poets' lines and let them solve some exercises afterwards. This activity can be correlated with a discussion about the personalities mentioned and their importance to the literary or music field. And in this way, students don't just practice their listening skills, but through a multimodal and interdisciplinary activity, they also get familiar to the culture of a certain country. And let me give you a clear example. The Romanian national poet is Mihai Eminescu, and maybe you have heard of him. Almost all the great Romanian singers composed songs based on his lines, and I guess this is also the case for your countries. Among his poems, I especially like the one entitled Dată de Fragedă, translated in English as So Delicate, and which was set to music by Romanian rock band of the 20th century, Mondial. Because time runs very fast, I will not play the lyrics, but you can listen to them at home because they are very gentle and beautiful. When I have this activity with my students, I first let them listen to the entire song, try to grasp the meaning and the theme of the poem, especially by association with the tempo of the music. Then we had the discussion on the main themes of Eminescu's poetry, and after that, while listening to this song the second time, the students had to fill in the missing words, and we recap the adjectives here, but this activity could go hand in hand with any types of activities that regards or listening activities. Not only music, but also, not only music, but also painting can be the starting point for an integrated and multimodal lesson. In order to develop the speaking skill and also to promote the national personality, students can be provoked to describe some paintings or illustrations which reflect the spirit of the country. More than that, the lesson can be focused on the country's proverbs, expressions, and sayings. I'm sure that you all have in your language expressions which have a certain metaphorical meaning, but another literal meaning. And of course, some painters willing to illustrate their funny literal meaning. In Romania, we have lots of sayings whose global meaning totally differs from the words used. And Adrian Serghe, a contemporary Romanian illustrator, made a very good job in illustrating them. I use this illustration as a starting point for our speaking lessons, and in the beginning I let the students describe the images, then we kept the vocabulary because most of the illustrations contain vocabulary related to the mass vocabulary like food, clothes, weather, and so on. And after that, have a guessing activity of seeing which is the meaning of that particular saying or proverb. As an example, I chose for you 15 Romanian sayings with their translation in English, and I invite you to watch the following short movie. Yes, please. Which is all ability we are confused. Without the portfolio, which is in addition, a is expression that was so this was about speaking and also having a very up-to-date discussion because we Romanians use lots of expressions and saying in our day-to-day conversation, and I noticed the fact that when we teach Romanian as a foreign language, we stick to the most used words or what we have in the notebooks, in the workbooks, but we skip a colloquial language that our students need. So this is why I decided to introduce this discussion as well in our conversations lessons. When it comes to reading, things become a little bit more complex because all of the reading parts found in the textbooks dedicated to teaching and learning a second language, and I guess this is not only in my country. The texts found in our textbooks are mainly non-literary texts, and if you teach your languages, second language, you Maybe you have also discovered this. So there are dialogues, interviews, letters, invitations, postcards, advertisements. This happens just because non-literary texts are supposed to be easier to understand than literary texts, and most of the time it's true. But in my opinion, learning a second language would be much more constructive and productive if literary texts would be involved in this process, and not only for C1 or C2 learners, but also for A1, B1, or B2 learners. Of course, canonical literature needs a very rich vocabulary in order to be accessible, but there are some other forms of literature that can be discussed during reading lessons, like comics. With a simplified language and lots of images, comics began to be popular not only among children or teenagers, but also among adults. Instead of reading only non-literary dialogues, I think it would be more constructive for students to also read literary dialogues, which have the power to put everything in context, and more than this, to help them understand and become familiar to the literature of the country, to the mindset of people, and to improve their imaginations. For example, in Romania, we have a set of volumes called didactic comics. If you want, you can browse it. Edited by Mihai Bâlc, and I think, and they represent rewritings of our canonical literature. So we have some canonical literature that all the students read and know, but these texts are simplified for foreign students or for children. So they are very accessible, and I use them in my lessons for the reading part, so as to make everything more enjoyable for my students. And comics are also very or good starting points for writing lessons. Instead of making students write some dialogues, unusual situations, or descriptions on themselves, on their families or houses, they should be involved in more creative activities, like recreating the words of the characters in a comic, maybe. This is just an idea. Apart from using the vocabulary they already know for their level, the advantage of such an activity involving multimodal texts would be the stimulation of creativity, and even if it seems like a stereotype, our society lacks imagination, so we can introduce it back to our students' lives, no matter the age. In this consideration, I also use this book. And I chose to present some images from a very loved story, which is Amintiri din Copilărie, translated in English as Memories of Childhood, written by Ion Creangă, which is a very important writer in Romania. And this is also a very good starting point for a discussion about traditional clothes in Romania, as the characters are dressed in a traditional way, about life in a city and at the countryside, about traditions in general. So this is one idea or a way I use multimodal texts in my writing activities with the foreign students. And regarding the evaluation process, I discovered recently the technique of photonovels, and I use these photonovels in project-based activities as evaluation for my students. Photonovels look like comic books, but they use photographs rather than drawings. And as Frank Serafini said, they are neither textually dominant nor visually dominant, they are blended structures. So our students get the most of these texts if we introduce photonovels in our maybe or even teaching or the evaluation process. And if you consider introducing photo novels in the teaching process, you can follow maybe these methodical steps. First of all, I had an introductory discussion on photo novels with my students as they didn't know what photo novels really are. So I told them that they need to take photos of themselves or of their family, friends, the environment, their house, something personal. Then make a collage of these photos and add bubble speeches in order to introduce some vocabulary parts. I use these photo novels as the project at the end of one semester to recap everything that we have discussed, and every student had different topics like the weather, the house, and everything that is discussed at the beginning when you learn in Romanian. For me, I teach in the preparatory year, so it's just 1 year they learn Romanian with me. Then we tackle the technological aspects because most of them don't really know how to create a photo novel, and I propose for this the software Canva, which is very handy. Then choose the topics, creating the photo novels, then having the presentations with the other students. So in order to recap in a traditional way all the vocabulary, they presented their photo novels, and we had more interesting discussion on the topics. So my students were very happy with the results and their presentations, and I also chose 2 of the photo novels that my students have created just to share with you what we have done. This was a presentation about the objects that we find in the house, and I was very surprised that my student decided to create like a story, not just present taking photos of the house and presenting the vocabulary there, but imagining that she is in Sibiu. The image that it's in the middle is the clock tower in Sibiu. If you come to Romania, you see it's a lovely place. And she rambled around the city. She discovered an announcement where it was told that there are some job opportunities, and she applies for the job opportunity. And then she gets lost at some point in the city. She presents the city a bit, and after that, she arrives at that house where she gets employed. And then the boss presents her the house, and then she introduced the actual vocabulary parts with the house, what you find in the house, and everything like that. And another photo novel that I liked was about weather. Another student of mine created like a dialogue with her daughter, in which daughter asks, "What's rain? What's temperature? What's hell?" And she explains this to me, to her. So we could recap some vocabulary regarding weather as well. These were some of the highlights or some of the things that I particularly liked or that my students liked, and I wanted to share with you regarding multimodal texts. I really encourage, if you teach your languages for language, I'm not sure exactly what's your field, but this could be a very good starting point for making the lessons and the evaluation process maybe a bit more pleasant for the students. Thank you very much for your patience and for your attention.